The fastest World Cup downhill racers spend serious amounts of time dialing in their bikes. Every major team in the off-season spend a significant amount of time setting up the suspension units on their bikes, and many of them using telemetry systems to work out precisely what is going on with those suspension units, the axle speeds and all that stuff versus the actual rider feel out on the trail. But can those same telemetry systems come in handy for you or I to get our bikes set up? Well, let's take a little trip to Spain and we'll find out. Now, we've seen telemetry systems on mountain bikes for many years, but in my experience, every time I've seen one of these sort of setups, it's been on racers' bikes, like some of the big racing teams, talking like Santa Cruz, and looking back in time, the Sun racing teams with Olivier Bassard and all those fast French racers back in the day. So I'm sure there's going to be advantages that any rider watching this could have, but where does that start? What can this system offer people?
Even from very beginners, it's really beneficial. Really top riders tend to know how they want the bike set up, how they know they want the bike to feel, and they can get somewhere near with the adjusters just by feel. Generally, weekend warriors, average people, a lot of the time have nothing to compare it to, no experience in setting up. So what we can do is fit this to their bike, they can go and do the runs and I can analyse the data, and then we can make changes from there to make sure that sort of you're on the right spring rates. There's a crucial one. It's one that not many people get right, and then we can balance out all the more intricate stuff like axle speeds and make it work how it's designed to work.
I guess so. I mean, so this is I'd say a fairly sort of standard style of bike, like forgetting the model. It's a trail bike, it's got 150mm travel. I'm taking a stamp here that some of your customers have got similar style bikes and they've been riding them quite a lot, but they're just not getting what they need out of the bike.
Oh, you can quite easily spend however much, 3, 4, 5, 6 grand on a bike, have all the dials and not have any idea what to do with them.
Oh, it can be really confusing, to be fair.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to basic bike setup with suspension, we're forever talking about this. You get your sag set up first, and then depending on what brand of shock you're using or suspension fork you're using, most of the manufacturers give you a bit of a guideline chart that roughly accords to your body weight, and then you can get a good baseline setting. So where would this sort of system go on top of that? Where's it going to get me?
So the main difference between setting static sag and what we use, which we call dynamic sag, is dynamic sag is taken across a full run of, so that's where your body's moving all the time.
Of course, yeah.
Because if you set your sag up static, you're never in that single, you cross that position.
Yeah, you're going to be weighting the front and then moving into the back of the bike.
Yeah. So what we do is use an average position to set spring rates across an entire run for your full dynamic range of movement.
Okay, so it's far more accurate then.
Yeah, it's far more accurate, yeah.
So how different can that be if being devil's advocate, if I'd set up 30% sag in the car park, front and rear, like just how wrong could that be?
So when we put the kit on and after having a look at a couple of runs, your dynamic sag on the front's about 24% and on the rear it's about nearly 35%.
Wow.
So it's quite an imbalance from front to rear.
Yeah, that's pretty mad.
This is
from just sitting on the bike.
Yeah, from just sitting on the bike.
Yeah.
Obviously that changes from track to track depending on how steep it is.
Yeah.
How flat it is. But generally you want to be around on a mid-track, you kind of want to be around the 30% dynamic.
Yeah, okay. So let's run through the actual equipment bit by bit so everyone knows what's going on, what it's recording. Yep. Let's start up at the handlebars where you can see the control unit and you've got like sensors on the brake levers there.
So this is the main acquisition unit. This records everything, takes everything in. We've got gyroscopes, G-force sensors and everything in here. Obviously brake sensors on there. We've got an external GPS antenna to give more accuracy for the GPS in there. So you can track it over, you can track times over laps, over runs. We've got a fork potentiometer on the front to measure what's happening on the fork and similar on the shock, a shorter potentiometer. We calculate what happens, the relationship between the rear axle and the shock to work out what's happening at the axles. So that'll give you your average axle speeds in compression and rebound. It'll give you average axle positions, max axle positions.
Okay.
So it gives us a good understanding of what the suspension's doing, what the bike's doing as a whole, not just suspension.
Okay, so for for sort of experimenting and getting a setup perfected, would I be right in assuming that the best thing to do is for the rider to ride like a familiar trail?
Yeah.
That they kind of think
Familiar
that they
trail
know and...
that's got a mix of everything on, anything like jumps, drops,
Yeah.
rock gardens, preferably berms, somewhere you're confident, you're fast on, you can just lap probably 10, 12 times to get a good setup.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you normally do this as a service for customers?
So normally we do it at Hampstead Forest, it's kind of local to me, but we can do it anywhere in the country really. We just travel around and we can do it anywhere in the country.
So I'm really excited to see what comes of this because I've changed a few things on a bike for the trip. I normally run an air shock on here, put the coil shock on here. I've actually changed from the 500 pound to 475. I've got the 500 with me. Also, completely unfamiliar terrain as well, so that's going to throw things out as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had 3 days of constant runs down this Spanish hillside here with the telemetry system on the bike, trying to sort of log everything that's going on. Now, bearing in mind, like I do have a way that I like to set my bikes up, but with some of the information that Steve's recorded on the system, turns out there's a few things that we need to change, and these changed and they've actually altered the bike for the better. Now, this is a super important thing to mention because of the fact that this sort of system isn't just for pros, this is for normal people that just want to make their bikes better and faster. Steve, just tell us a little bit about a few of the things that you've tweaked on the bike and sort of the effects that that's going to have for, well, not just me, but for someone else doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah, originally we looked at average positions, so that's your dynamic sag, so that's your average axle positions, front and rear, across the entire run and across the entire sort of body movement range. We looked at it, it was pretty good to be honest, it was pretty well sprung in the right ballpark. We had a little bit too little compression on the front.
Yep.
So we've gone down a little bit of pressure and then propped it back up with a little bit lower speed that stops it dive and keeps the front end up a little bit more, but controls the axle speed under compression a bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Rear, at the start of the day we were probably around about half the speed and compression and rebound, on the rear from the front.
Compared to front, so a lot slower than
it was
the front.
A lot slower, yeah.
Which to me, it didn't feel too much different, but yeah, sorry, carry on.
So that's gonna, your front wheel will be tracking the ground nice, the back wheel will be then packing up.
Yep.
And making it harsher through sort of towards the end of rock gardens.
Yeah.
And putting you out of control, increasing your spring rate because you're deeper in the spring. So I think we took 4 or 5 clicks of rebound off, which is quite a lot really.
Yeah.
And then obviously that's matched up the rebound speeds for the front and the rear axle. So when you hit a section, the front wheel does something and the back wheel follows what the front wheel's done.
Yeah.
That gives you like predictability, grip.
Yeah, and really to emphasise the point of this, so the bike feels much more lively, and actually how I would probably try and set it up to start with, but I've actually gone the other way to try and cancel out some bad habits, maybe getting bucked and stuff that I'm scared of, like a lot of people are. But the result now of having a faster back end and the way it's working is I just feel like I've got loads more grip on the back.
It's quite hard to guess a setup for just by feel.
Yeah, so I guess the biggest thing here, I mean, I can't underline this enough, is like you set your sag up in a car park, it's only ever going to give you a ballpark figure. Yeah. You know, you can get it roughly right, which this bike was about right to start with. You get it on the trail, and what this sort of system can record, the way that your body weight moves around on the bike, you're changing everything, and it can record the averages of where your suspension is sitting, and that's like, I think that is gold, what that can achieve. Like, I'm sure my bike just feels so much better now than it did like 3 days ago. And, you know, a few clicks really is all it takes. But to get the understanding, like, I think anyone can benefit from this.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if pro riders can benefit from it, and get faster and get better setups, and they're tuned into the bike completely.
Yeah.
And they know how they want to feel, and they know how to get it to feel like that. If they can benefit from it, beginners and weekend warriors who've got a lot of adjustment and don't quite understand how it works, there's a massive gain to be had there, even just getting spring rate right.
So let's go back to the sort of the target audience, really. Like, we're not looking at the serious riders here, we're looking at like anyone that wants to get a bike set up well. What do you see as the most common mistakes that you have to work with?
The most common mistake we have coming in is people generally set the spring rate on the rear too soft.
So the back end too soft on the bike, full stop?
The bike sits further down in the rear than it does in the front.
Yeah.
And that generally causes, when you go off a jump, you push quite deep in the travel.
Yeah.
And then with the normal rebound setting, because you've gone really far in the spring and the spring stored a lot of energy, it then kicks back.
Yep.
So people slow the rebound
Crank
down
on the rebound, yep.
to stop it from kicking. But then we go back to packing up in rock gardens and rough sections because it's just not fast enough to recover.
So basically a firmer rear suspension and
Yep.
less rebound is actually the ultimate quest to
That
get
is
to.
generally what I see myself doing over most people's bikes.
I've done exactly this. You know, I've had too much rebound on a bike, which again, I'm quite surprised at, but the setup difference it's made is day and night. So I need to get this sorted out on all the rest of the bikes now. So over the last few days, I've actually learned loads of stuff about suspension that I didn't know previously. Small nuances like running my fork a bit softer, using the compression just to prop it up a bit more make a massive difference. And actually, probably the biggest thing was the rear suspension. So now what I know is I can jump between two different springs, a 475 and a 500, and not change my rebound setting, which I probably was guilty of before to try and control it. Now, just think about this. If I can learn from this, literally anyone can. It's not for the pros. Like, obviously the pros can get something out of this, but this is for anyone that's got a good mountain bike with good suspension. You can get something out of this. And actually, I would really consider looking into services like this. I think it's an awesome thing to really understand what's going on with your bike. I mean, you spend a lot of money on your bike. Why would you not get it dialed in like this? Links to Suspension Doctor are going to be in the description underneath. Check out the service. Honestly, it's awesome. Hopefully you've loved watching this video as much as I've loved having my bike dialed in by Steve. Give us a thumbs up if you like Suspension Doctor and you love learning about this stuff, because we do. See you in the next video. Ta-ra.